Friend, I want you to hear the sound first, because that is the part I still can't put down. It was a flat crack, like a dinner plate dropped on brick. 200 conversations stopped at the same instant. A waiter froze with a tray of oyster shells against his hip. Somebody's glass tipped over on a linen table and nobody reached for it. 120 people stood in a garden by the water in Charleston, South Carolina, and for about 4 seconds not one of them made a sound. My glasses were lying in the grass 8 feet away, with one lens cracked clean across. My hand was still up in the air, and my daughter-in-law was staring at me with her palm pressed to her cheek and her mouth open, and I could see in her eyes that she had just understood something she had been wrong about for 11 years. My name is Frank Delaney. I am 71 years old. I spent 34 years as a marine engineer, mostly on container ships and dry docks, and I have never in my life raised my hand to a woman, not once. Not my wife, not my sister, not a stranger. My father did that in our house when I was a boy, and I made myself a promise about it when I was 9 years old, standing at the top of a staircase in Norfolk with my fists balled up, and I kept that promise for 62 years. I broke it in a garden on a Saturday afternoon in April. Before you decide what you think about me, let me take you back 6 hours. And then let me take you back 2 days, because the 2 days matter more than the 6 hours, and I didn't understand that until much later. The invitation had come in the mail 4 weeks earlier, and heavy cream paper, gold lettering, the kind of thing that costs more than it needs to. My son Nathan and his wife Vanessa were celebrating 10 years of marriage at a place called Cypress Hall, a restored rice plantation house out on the Ashley River with a lawn that runs down to a dock and live oaks with Spanish moss hanging off them like old lace. I read that invitation about 9 times. Here is why. It had been 1 year since I had spent an afternoon alone with my granddaughter Nora. 1 year. I had seen her 4 times in that year, always in a crowd, always for 20 minutes, always with someone standing nearby checking a watch. Christmas at a restaurant instead of at a house. A dance recital where I sat 6 rows behind them and got a wave. A hospital fundraiser where she hugged me around the waist and then was taken away to meet somebody's donor. Nora was 7. She is the reason I get out of bed. My wife Marguerite passed 6 years ago this September, and when a man loses the person who has been translating the world for him for 41 years, he goes very quiet for a while. Nora is the one who pulled me back out. When she was 4, she decided that the moon was following her car, and she wanted an explanation, and I gave her one that took 3 hours and involved a flashlight, a grapefruit, and a tennis ball on my kitchen floor. After that, we were partners. Marguerite had a brass field telescope her own father brought back from Germany in 1968. Small thing, about 14 inches, heavier than it looks, with a leather cap and her initials scratched into the barrel where she'd done it herself with a hat pin when she was a girl. She used to take it up to the flat part of our roof on Trad Street. She kept a star chart she drew by hand on butcher paper marked with the dates she saw things, going back to the year we got married. I had been saving both of them for Nora. I decided the anniversary party was the day. I want to be honest with you about something, my friends, because you'll figure it out anyway. I knew things were wrong. I had known for about a year and I had been telling myself a story about it, the way you do. Nathan is 38. He runs operations for a hospital system. He is a good man who has never once in his life been able to stand in a room where 2 people are angry. He'd rather agree with both of them and go sit in his truck. When his phone calls got shorter, I told myself hospitals are busy. When he stopped saying we and started saying Vanessa thinks, I told myself that's marriage. When a year went by and I hadn't had my granddaughter to myself for one single afternoon, I told myself I was being a sensitive old man about it. That is the first thing I'd like you to take from all this. When your gut tells you the temperature in your family has dropped, don't argue with your gut. Your gut has been keeping score longer than you have. Now, 2 days before that party, on a Thursday afternoon, I made a telephone call. It took 9 minutes. I want you to hold on to the fact that I made it, because I'm not going to tell you yet what it was about. At the time, I thought it was routine. I thought it was a small matter of bookkeeping between adults. I hung up and went and cut my grass. I found out later that Vanessa did not sleep for the next 2 nights. Saturday came up warm and clear, the kind of April day Charleston puts in the brochures. I wore my gray suit and the blue tie Marguerite bought me in 1997. I polished my shoes on the back step. I put the telescope in a canvas bag with the star chart rolled up beside it, and I drove out River Road with the windows down, smelling the pluff mud from the marsh, feeling better than I had felt in months. Cypress Hall was beautiful, I'll give it that. String lights had been run through the oaks. There was a bar built out of reclaimed barn wood, and a raw bar with a young man shucking oysters and a band setting up on the porch. 120 people, easy. Vanessa's clients, mostly. She has clients the way other people have friends. I stood at the top of the lawn with that canvas bag in my hand and I looked for my son. Nathan was down near the dock, talking to two men in blazers. He had his hospital face on, the polite one. He looked up, saw me, and I watched his shoulders go tight. Not happy tight, the other kind. He raised a hand and gave me a smile that stopped about halfway. I told myself he was hosting. Hosting is stressful. Then I heard my name. Not my name. The other one. Grandpa. Nora came around the corner of the raw bar at a dead run. Blue dress, white sandals, already grass-stained. Hair coming out of whatever her mother had put it in. She was carrying a cocktail napkin with a drawing on it that she had clearly made in the last 10 minutes for the express purpose of giving it to somebody, and when she saw me she started running so hard she nearly went down in the grass. My friends, I want to tell you what that does to a man who has been eating dinner alone for 6 years. Everything else went away. The blazers, the string lights, my son's tight shoulders. I got down on one knee, which at 71 is a decision and not a movement, and I put my arms out, and she came the last 20 feet with her whole face lit up like a window. Grandpa, I got a telescope question. She never finished it. Vanessa came out of the crowd from my left. I didn't see her until she was already there. She had her hand around Nora's arm and she pulled my granddaughter backward, out of the air, and put her behind her hip, and then she turned and hit me across the face with her open hand. I was on one knee. I want you to picture that, because it matters to me that you do. I was down. My weight was already forward. When her hand came across my cheekbone, my glasses went off my face, and I went sideways into the grass with my shoulder and my hip taking the ground, and the canvas bag with Marguerite's telescope in it coming down under my arm. The world went soft and gray at the edges. Without my glasses, everything past 6 feet is watercolor. I heard her voice above me. She was not whispering, but, you are not welcome here. Stay away from my family. I lay in the grass, and I could hear the marsh birds, and I could hear a woman somewhere say, "Oh my God," and I could hear my granddaughter start to cry. That was the sound that got through. Not the slap. Nora, 7 years old, in a blue dress, crying behind her mother's leg on the lawn of her parents' anniversary party, and then, something in me came loose. I have thought about this for a long time now. What I want to tell you is that it was not a decision. People say they saw red, and I always thought that was a figure of speech. It isn't. The blood comes up behind your eyes, and there's a sound in your ears like a compressor kicking on. I got up, 71 years old, on a bad hip, and I got up off that grass faster than I have moved in a decade, and I brought my hand across her face. That was the crack you heard at the beginning. Her head turned. She took a step back into a chair and caught herself on the back of it. And then, absolute silence. 120 people. The band stopped. The oyster shucker stopped. And somewhere a phone was ringing in a purse and nobody answered it. I heard my own voice come out of me like it belonged to somebody else. I said, "You put your hands on me in front of my granddaughter. And now I'm going to stop the story right here, because I know some of you are already halfway to the comments section, and you deserve better than a man who only tells the flattering part. I am not proud of that. I have never once told this story and been proud of that. There were 120 witnesses on that lawn. There were phones in every pocket. There was a police station 4 miles up the road, and a lawyer of mine who would have been there in 15 minutes. Every single thing that happened afterward would have happened anyway, and it would have happened cleaner if I had stayed on the ground and let those 120 people see exactly what she had done to an old man on one knee. I gave that up for 2 seconds of satisfaction. That's the truth. I traded my clean hands for 2 seconds. And I'd be lying to you if I said I don't still feel the sting of it in my palm sometimes when I'm falling asleep. Not the shame, exactly. Both at once, and they don't cancel out. Anybody who tells you those two things cancel out has never done it. All right, back to the lawn. The first person to move was my son. I have to give him this, and I want you to hear it, because for a long time I only told the part where Nathan disappointed me. Nathan came across that grass like he was going through a door. He got between us. He put one hand flat on Vanessa's shoulder and moved her back a full step, and he said, "Don't, don't." And then he turned around and he crouched down and picked my glasses up out of the grass and put his hand under my arm, which I did not need but did not refuse. His hands were shaking so hard he dropped the glasses twice. "Dad, Dad, sit down. Dad, please just sit down." Behind him, Vanessa was already reassembling herself. I watched it happen. Bye. The rage went off her face like a light switch and the tears came up in about 4 seconds, which is a thing I have only seen a few times in my life and never forgotten any of them. She turned to the crowd with her hand on her cheek and she said, "He hit me. You all saw. He hit me." And the crowd, and this is the part I'll remember when I'm 90, the crowd did not move toward her. Not one person. Saying, Tama. 120 of her clients and her friends and her decorators and her contractors, and they stood there and looked at her the way you look at a car accident. Because they'd all just watched a 35-year-old woman yank a 7-year-old backward by the arm and knock a kneeling old man into the grass. The order of events was not in dispute. It had happened in front of everybody in broad daylight in about 4 seconds, and there was not one soul on that lawn who could pretend otherwise. I heard a woman near the bar say, quite clearly, "Vanessa." He was on his knees. My niece Bethany, my late sister's girl, had already scooped Nora up. I saw her carrying my granddaughter around the side of the house toward the koi pond with Nora's face pressed into her shoulder, talking to her the whole way. I have thanked that young woman probably 50 times since, and it isn't enough. Because the next hour of that afternoon was not for a child, and Bethany understood that before I did. I sat down in the chair Nathan pointed at. I put my glasses on with the cracked lens, and the world came back in one clear half and one broken half, which felt about right, and then I took out my phone. I did not call the police. I did not call an ambulance. My son was standing 3 feet away from me, so I did not need to call him either. I called Ray Okafor. Ray has been my attorney for 22 years. He set up my consulting company when I retired off the ships. He wrote Marguerite's will, and he held my elbow at her funeral. He lives 11 minutes from Cypress Hall, and he was, that Saturday, sitting on his own porch with a crossword. He picked up on the second ring. I said, "Ray, Cypress Hall, out on River Road. Come now. Bring the Ashcroft vein file. Bring the operating agreement. And bring what Dale sent me on Thursday." There was a pause on the line about 3 seconds long. Ray said, "Frank, are you all right?" I said, "No," and I hung up. Vanessa was watching me. She had stopped crying. She'd heard the name of her own company come out of my mouth, and I watched her face do something I had never seen it do before, in 11 years, not once. She went pale. Not embarrassed pale. Not angry pale. The other kind. The kind that comes up from underneath. Nathan said, "Dad, what's the file?" "Dad, what file?" And I said the only thing I could say to my son right then, which was, "Sit down, son. Ray's coming. Now let me take you back to Thursday, because I promised you I would, and because this is the piece that took me a year to understand." 2 days before that party, my CPA called me. His name is Dale Witten, and he has done my books since 1998, and he does not call unless there's a reason. In 2016, Vanessa wanted to start a design studio, Ashcroft and Vane Interiors. 5. Nathan came to me with the numbers, and I looked at them for a week, and then I put in $180,000. That was not a gift. I am not a rich man, and that money was a chunk of what Marguerite and I had built over 4 decades of me being gone 8 months a year. So we did it properly. Ray drew it up. Thank you for what? Ray drew it up. I hold 60% of the membership units in that LLC. I have never taken $1 of distribution, and I have never once walked into the office, and I have never in 9 years said a word about a chair or a color or a client. I signed my consent forms when they came in the mail, and I stayed out of it, because it was hers to run and I wanted her to succeed. I wanted my son's wife to succeed. I think she genuinely forgot. I think for 8 or 9 years, the old man's name on a piece of paper in a drawer stopped being real to her. That happens. Paper is quiet. Dale's call on Thursday was about a vendor. Over 14 months, $196,000 had gone out of Ashcroft and Vane to a company called Palmetto Sourcing Group, coded as fabric and millwork. Dale had gotten curious because the payments were round numbers and always landed on a Friday. Palmetto Sourcing Group was registered 9 months after the first payment. Its address was a mailbox store on Meeting Street. Its registered agent was a man named Curtis Vane, Vanessa's brother. That was the 9-minute phone call. And here is the part that I will carry. After I hung up with Dale, I called Vanessa. I want to be very clear about how I did it because I have gone over it 1,000 times. I did not accuse her. I did not raise my voice. I said, Vanessa, Dale flagged some vendor payments and I'd like to sit down Monday and go through it together. I said, I'm sure there's an explanation. I said, let's keep this between us until we understand it. She said, of course, Frank, pleasant as anything. Monday's fine. And then she hung up the phone and spent 48 hours believing that I was going to stand up at her 10-year anniversary party in front of 120 of her clients and destroy her. She came at me on that lawn because she was terrified, not because she hated me. Because for 2 days she had been living inside a version of me that did not exist, and when I got down on one knee in the grass with my arms open, what she saw coming was not a grandfather. That is the whole engine of it. Every bad thing that happened that day happened because a guilty person could not imagine an innocent motive. Ray Okafor arrived 19 minutes after I called him. He came up that lawn in golf clothes with a leather portfolio under his arm and reading glasses pushed up on his head, and people got out of his way without knowing why. He looked at my face. There was a mark coming up along my cheekbone by then. He looked at Vanessa standing by the chair. He looked at 120 people standing around a raw bar not eating oysters. And then he did the one thing I will be grateful to him for, as long as I live. He leaned down and said, quietly, right in my ear, so nobody else on that lawn heard a word of it, Frank. Not out here. I had a projector. I want to tell you that. There was a screen set up on the porch for a slideshow of 10 years of marriage. My phone was in my hand and Dale's summary was in my email, and I could have put $196,000 of my son's wife's theft up on a 6-foot screen in front of every client she had. I thought about it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. I sat in that chair with my face on fire and I thought about it hard for probably 15 seconds. And then I looked past the porch, down toward the koi pond, where my niece was crouched down with her arms around a 7-year-old in a blue dress who was still crying. My friends, hear me on this. There is a line between justice and a show. Justice is quiet, and it is written down, and it holds up in a room with a judge in it. A show is loud, and it feels wonderful for about a minute, and then it belongs to everybody, forever, including the child. Nora had already watched her mother knock her grandfather down. She was not going to watch the rest of it. Not one more second of it. Whatever else I got wrong that day, I did not get that wrong. I said, Ray, is there an office in this building? There was. A small room off the back hall, with a desk and 2 windows and a print of a hunting dog on the wall. 4 of us went in. Ray, me, Nathan, and Vanessa. Nathan closed the door himself. Ray put the portfolio on the desk and opened it, and he did not raise his voice one time in the next 20 minutes. He laid out the operating agreement first. 60%, Frank Delaney, since March of 2016. Nathan read it twice. I watched my son find out, at 38 years old, that the studio he had been telling people his wife built from nothing had been built on his father's retirement money, and that neither of the people who knew that had ever bothered to tell him. That one is on me too. I never told him because I thought it would embarrass him. Turns out, protecting a grown man from the truth is just a slower way of lying to him. Then Ray laid out Dale's summary. 14 months. Then, Palmetto Sourcing Group, Curtis Vane, registered agent, $196,000. And then he laid out the last page, which I had not seen until that moment, because Dale had found it Friday morning and sent it to Ray instead of me. In November, somebody had applied for a $95,000 equipment line of credit at a bank on Calhoun Street, using the LLC as collateral. The application required the signature of a 60% member. My signature was on it. I have signed my name maybe 200,000 times in 71 years. I know what it looks like. That was not it. The F was wrong. The F has been wrong my whole life, ever since a nun in Norfolk made me write it 400 times, and whoever copied it off my consent form had copied the shape and missed the mistake. Nathan made a sound in that room I hope to never hear again. He sat down on the edge of the desk with the paper in his hand, and he said, "Vanessa, just her name." She said, "Nathan, I can explain the vendor." And he said, "That's my father's name." She didn't have anything for that. There wasn't anything. I'm going to move quickly through what came next, because it is the least interesting part and it took the longest. Vanessa was charged. Forged instrument and financial exploitation. It was not the police who drove that. In the end, it was the bank's fraud unit. Once Ray's letter landed on the right desk on Monday morning, because a forged signature on a $95,000 note is not a family matter. It is a federal-flavored problem with a lender attached. She took a plea 11 months later. Restitution, 3 years probation, no jail. Her brother Curtis got a lesser version of the same. I filed a report about the assault. I want to be truthful with you. I also handed over a statement about what I did back, in my own words, in the first paragraph, before anybody asked me for it. 2 deputies looked at 11 cell phone videos of a man on one knee getting hit and a man getting up and hitting back, and nobody was charged, and I did not ask for anybody to be. Ashcroft and Vane closed in September. I took the loss, all of it, at 71, on a fixed income. It came out of the money Marguerite and I saved so we could see Ireland, and we never saw Ireland, and now nobody will. Nathan filed in June. And the divorce was the ugly one. The criminal case was arithmetic. The divorce was a war, because a war over a child always is, and it went 8 months and it took everything my son had. Vanessa's attorney tried to make me the story. Violent grandfather, elder with a temper, financial control over a young woman's business. And they had a photograph of my hand in the air, from a phone, from about 40 feet, and that photograph is very bad if you don't have the 11 seconds before it. That is what I bought with my 2 seconds. That is the price. I want you to know the number. The judge watched all 11 videos. Nathan got primary custody. Vanessa gets supervised weekends and she keeps them most of the time, and I have never once said a word to Nora about her mother that wasn't neutral, and I never will. And I'd ask you to believe that costs me something every single time. Now, let me tell you about the year that came after, because that's the part nobody puts in the thumbnail. It was terrible. My son moved into a 2-bedroom rental in West Ashley with a 7-year-old and 11 boxes, and he sat on the floor of that place at 2 in the morning for about 3 months. He went to counseling. He made me go with him twice, which I did not want to do and which I now think saved something between us. In one of those sessions, the counselor asked Nathan what he was angriest about. I braced for it. I figured it was the slap, or the money, or the fact that I never told him about the 60%. He said, that my father was on the ground, and it took me 2 seconds to move. I told him 2 seconds is fast. I told him I've known men who took 2 years. I told him the truth, which is that he got between us, and that he is the only person on that lawn who did. Nora had a rough stretch. She stopped sleeping in her own room for a while. She asked me one night, out of nowhere, over a plate of spaghetti, "Grandpa, are you mad at me?" 7 years old, and she had done the arithmetic children do, which is that the worst day of her life happened when she ran toward me. So it must be attached to her somehow. I got down on the floor of that little rental kitchen, bad hip and all, and I told her that nothing that happened on that lawn was hers. Not one piece of it. That she is the reason I came, and the reason I stayed, and that a grown-up's bad afternoon is never a child's fault, no matter who was standing where. She's 8 now. It's been a year and 2 months. I sold the house on Trad Street, which was too big for one old man anyway and had been for 6 years, and I moved into a place 6 blocks from Nathan's new house, which he owns, which he pays for, which I did not put $1 into and will not, because he needs that, and I understand now why he needs it. There is a flat part on my roof, small, maybe 8 feet by 10, with a rail. I had a contractor put a proper stair up to it. Marguerite's brass telescope came out of that canvas bag with 1 dent in the barrel from where it hit the ground under my arm. I had it cleaned, but I told the man to leave the dent. Nora asked about it once, and I told her the truth. In the version an 8-year-old should get, it fell down one time and it still works fine, and that's most of what you need to know about anything. The star chart on butcher paper is thumbtacked to the wall going up the stairs. Her grandmother's dates in one color, going back to 1984. Nora's in another. She has 14 entries. Now, She caught Saturn in October and wrote it down herself with the date and the time and the words "it has ears," which is not scientifically precise, but I am not correcting it. Friday nights, she's on that roof. So here's what I've got for you, my friends, and then I'll let you go. For 11 years, I was the quiet one. I was the old man in the corner at the holidays who brought a casserole and left early. Nobody at that party would have picked me out of a lineup as a person with any power in that family at all, and that was fine with me, because I had done my important work a long time ago with a pen, in a lawyer's office, in 2016, on a piece of paper nobody had read in 9 years. Do the quiet work. Sign your name in the right places. Keep your own copy. And know a good attorney, and know him for 20 years, before you need him. That is not cynicism. That is love with a spine on it. And the other thing, the harder thing, standing up for yourself and losing your temper are not the same act, and I got taught the difference in front of 120 people at my son's anniversary party. Everything that actually protected my family that day happened in a small back room with the door closed, over 20 quiet minutes, with a lawyer reading out loud from a folder. The part that felt the best is the part that cost me the most. I'd stand up again. I'd get off that grass again in a heartbeat. But I would keep my hand down, and I'd let 120 people look at what she'd done to a kneeling old man, and I'd have walked out of there with clean hands and the same result and a year of my son's life back. That's what I know now. I bought it at full price. So let me ask you, since you've stayed with me this whole way, and I mean this, I read them all. If a grown woman knocked you into the grass in front of your own grandchild, and you're my age, and your hip is bad and your glasses are gone, and everybody is watching, do you keep your hand down? Tell me honestly, and tell me where you're listening from tonight, because I like knowing who's out there. There's an old man in South Carolina reading every one of them from a roof, with a dented brass telescope, and a girl in the next chair who is currently very upset about Pluto.